So you can pretty much smoke a joint anywhere you smoke a cigarette. Did you ever think you'd live to see the day?
I really didn't. And, it wasn't so long ago, here in Ontario anyways, that wasn't going to be the rule. The Kathleen Wynne and the Liberal government brought in really restrictive rules. It was all going to be government-run stores. You could only smoke in a private residence. And then suddenly along came Conservative Doug Ford and said, nope, we're going to throw open retail to the private sector and you can smoke a joint anywhere you can smoke a cigarette. Now, cities can override that, and some have. The city of Markham, just north of Toronto, yesterday had a special council meeting just days before the election and said, no, you can only smoke in a private residence. So we'll see how many cities do that. But for now, it's the Wild West.
But on a federal level, what do you think changed? Because I think Stephen Harper tried to do something similar to this. What do you think changed?
Well, I just never thought I'd see the day. We went through 2 debates in the 2000s on decriminalization, which was a much less ambitious step. And Jean Chrétien's government tabled a decriminalization bill. Paul Martin's government tabled a decriminalization bill. They went nowhere. And one of the big reasons people said they went nowhere was because everyone thought Washington would freak out. And we haven't heard a peep from Washington. And it's Donald Trump, and Jeff Sessions is his attorney general, and he thinks marijuana is just the worst thing in the world. So it's a strange sort of, almost an anticlimax. A lot of work went into it, clearly. And I think they did a pretty good job of it, but it's here, and even the Conservatives now are saying, well, we're not going to turn back the clock. We're going to have to deal with any bad things that come with it under the framework of legalization. So it looks like it was always there, ready to be done. We needed a government to come and do it.
But as much as there was a movement, if you will, to legalize pot, there is also this resistance, this pushback. I mean, not everyone's on this same page.
No, clearly not. And a lot of this will depend. Now that it's legalized, we're going to see what happens, right? And one of the interesting things is that you have 13 different jurisdictions in Canada, and depending on the province, municipalities within those jurisdictions are able to set their own rules. And so what you have now, and some people hate this, but what you have is a giant experiment. And what that means on the bright side is that everyone can look at everyone else and see who's doing it right, who's putting the black market out of business, in what provinces is marijuana use among teens going down, impaired driving, who's doing it right, who's doing it wrong. That's, I think, the upside of it. And that, I think, because it's so unlikely that you're ever going to recriminalize it, I think everyone now that it's over and the fight's over, you just have to face facts and say, well, we make the best of this under the rubric of legalization. And all the problems that we're talking about, impaired driving, workplace safety, brain damage potentially among young people, those problems exist now, even though it's illegal, or it's not illegal. They existed yesterday, even though it was illegal. I think it just makes sense to now that it's out in the open, we can deal with them better.
You mentioned the black market, and I'm just wondering, because there's been a lot of talk in terms of, will this decriminalization be enough to displace the black market? I mean, you can grow 4 plants at home. Do you think all of this will add up to phasing them out?
Well, yeah, you're right that the home grow, allowing that, which was a surprising, I think, element in terms of the liberalness of it, that should help with the black market. I don't know what percentage of users are really inclined to grow their own. But beyond that, to me, it's going to be the price point. It's going to be getting it, price point and availability. So in Ontario, for example, there's no limit on the number of stores. Plus there's mail order. So to me, that's going to give, assuming that they get the price point right, because that's going to be provincially regulated, assuming they get the price point right, that should put the black market out of business. But then you look at our situation with cigarettes, which is pretty much analogous, and there's counterfeit cigarettes, contraband cigarettes everywhere, right? And there's all kinds of organized crime associated with that, and that's been a problem for years, forever, because the price of cigarettes keeps going up and up and up and up. So, that'll be interesting to watch. Once the idea of marijuana legalization was not that we want people to smoke more. How do you balance those two goals? The traditional way you dissuade people from drinking or smoking is to make it more expensive. But the more you do that, the more you encourage the black market. So it's a really delicate balancing act. But I think that the provinces that have gone the most liberal, like Ontario and Alberta, have the best chance of doing it. And the provinces that have been the most conservative about it, like Quebec, which I think has just opened 1 or 2 stores today, and which has been totally reluctant the whole time to even touch this, I think they're logically going to have the hardest time putting the black market out of business.
What are some of the, I guess, biggest challenges right out of the gate? I mean, are you putting your credit card down on these sites?
I'm not usually paranoid, but I wouldn't put my credit. Well, I don't use marijuana, but if I did, that is a big issue. I think obviously all the provinces have given assurances that your credit card data is not going to be shared with the Americans, and that is a concern for people. Now, it's not a new concern. There's been all this talk. Well, what happens when we go to the border? Well, what happens when you go to the border is what has always happened when you go to the border, which is that the border guard does what he wants. They're basically laws unto themselves. So if you go up to the border and they say, do you ever smoke marijuana? And you say yes, chances are you're going to be banned for life from the United States. So take that under advisement. In terms of new challenges, I'm not sure there really are that many. All these challenges existed before. I think impaired driving is going to be a challenge for the government because they've introduced this draconian law where police are now able to stop anyone without any justification, without any suspicion of impairment. And that's going to end up in court if it hasn't already ended up in court, and I suspect it'll be struck down. So that eliminates one of the sort of pieces that they put in there to try and mollify critics. Say, well, we'll give police more power. Then there's the question of detecting impairment. It's a huge question mark. There's no conclusive link, conclusively established link between how much THC is in your blood and how impaired you are. And these roadside testers just are not proven to work. So again, that's going to wind up in court. I'm sure at some point, pretty soon, the Supreme Court's going to have to rule on whether this law saying, well, if you have X level of THC in your blood, you're guilty of an offense. But if it doesn't prove impairment, is that going to survive a constitutional challenge? I don't know. I think that's going to be the biggest headache for the government going right away. They're going to look like they've kind of unleashed this horde of impaired drivers on the road. I don't think that's necessarily a fair criticism because there's always been marijuana impaired drivers. But if people start using it more, and the evidence in Colorado certainly is that adults will start using it a little bit more, then that could be a legitimate issue. But other than that, I think we're going to find that a lot of these issues, these supposed problems, are just going to kind of melt away, and people are going to treat it the way they do cigarettes and the way they do alcohol.
What are your thoughts on, I guess, giving pardons to former criminals who have these small possession charges or possession charges in general?
Well, I think it makes perfect sense. I mean, if the goal is, it's interesting that they dug in their heels for so long. I guess if they teased that they were going to give these pardons, then I guess suddenly you're just going to be facing questions about it day in, day out. So I guess it made sense to just announce it yesterday, the day before they were going to legalize it. But I think it makes perfect sense. There are very few people, even among conservatives, who will say that it makes sense to stick a criminal record on someone who was busted for simple possession. And there are a remarkable number of people who are. You talk to some people and they'll say, well, police never bust people for simple possession. It's just not true. Tens of thousands of charges every year are laid for simple possession. And if they're young people, then their record gets expunged when they're 18. But other than that, it's, I don't see how it would make sense not to pardon people when for 25 years at least, everyone has recognized that criminalizing simple possession is just incredibly silly. It's just the government has never managed to get around to fixing the problem.